Hello, everyone. My name is Les Harrison, head of automotive at OUTFRONT Media, and welcome to the third installment of Influenced by OUTFRONT. Today, we will be discussing how technology is transforming automotive advertising within the out-of-home space. For decades, automotive marketers have been using out-of-home for brand fame, to support vehicle launches, and dealer proximity targeting. The industry has evolved, and today we have digital at scale with a robust tool set from audience targeting, along with programmatic and attribution solutions on par with other mediums. We hope you find this discussion insightful, as it has never been a more exciting time for automotive marketers to leverage out of home. One item of housekeeping, please submit your questions on the Q&A tab down below, and we'll try to get to them at the end of the session. I'm thrilled to be joined today by industry leaders. Lucy Markowitz, VP National Sales at Vistar Media, Joe Kirakosa, General Manager at IHS Markit, and renowned automotive journalist, Jim Motivelli. Welcome, everyone. Just want to do a quick around the horn and let everyone give a quick introduction around their organization and some insights into their role, and we'll start with Lucy.
Thank you very much. Hi, I'm Lucy Markowitz, and I run U.S. demand sales at Vistar Media, and I'm very excited to be here today with this crew. For some background, Vistar Media is a programmatic technology company in the out-of-home space, helping to connect brands and publishers in the physical world. Vistar has both a specialized DSP for out-of-home, allowing marketers to leverage many of the same audiences and measurement and tactics that they're used to using in the digital space. And we also have the largest digital out-of-home SSP globally, with screens in the US, Canada, Australia, and the UK.
Awesome, thanks, Lucy. Joe, how about yourself?
Thanks, Les. Appreciate you having me on. I'm Joe Kiriakosa. I oversee the Polk Automotive Solutions business within IHS Markit. We essentially collect all of the country's automotive transaction data from various sources, 100% coverage, and create really high performing audiences for marketers to leverage across channels, including out of home now, which is fantastic, and the ability to also measure the effectiveness of campaigns through our demand signals, which essentially allows us to do sales match, as well as matching back to all other attributes of an automotive household, which just presents exciting options for marketers across different channels. I run this team of sellers and product people and customer success folks that are helping agencies and marketers and platforms really do a better job to do smarter marketing, targeting on behalf of auto companies.
Awesome, thanks, Joe, appreciate it. Jim, tell us a little bit about yourself.
In the 9 books, write for Barron's, the New York Times, Media Village, Auto Week, a bunch of them. And I cover the industry. It's a fast-moving industry. Not only do we have electrification, we also have the self-driving car, and we have COVID-19, all these things. It's like a perfect storm affecting the industry. And I think we've seen more changes in the last year than we have in the last 10. So it's a unique time to be covering the industry and watching the trends develop.
Yeah, Jim, you have a truly vast experience in the auto space, and we appreciate you joining us as well. You offer just a really unique perspective. And one thing that we discussed during our prep call is that change in the process around purchasing a vehicle and how it's gotten a little bit more digital. I mean, I just recently purchased a new vehicle, and I can attest it was, about as painless as it can get now, finally, when purchasing a vehicle. And so, just to kick it off, first question really heads to you is really, how has the process changed the advertising approach for auto marketers?
Well, I think automakers are sort of trying to figure out what their advertising approach should be. They've been seduced by Google and Facebook to a large degree because of the amount of feedback they get, the data, and their ability to target customers very directly. But I think they're very unsure about it. They're looking for other things that are going to work. I think it's fascinating how the out-of-home space has developed the ability to deliver some of that data to the companies. And I think they're open to new approaches because they're rethinking their entire ad buy as a result of COVID. Just as it's changed the auto purchase thing, as you mentioned, some of the trends were visible before COVID, but they're accelerated by COVID. Like I talked to one dealer that sold 200 cars to people who never visited the showroom. And that's unprecedented. Usually the trend we've been seeing is people were buying cars and doing all their research ahead of time, but then going to the dealer to actually kick the tires and see the vehicle. Now that last barrier is potentially not there. So a lot of things changing, and that affects how they're going to advertise the car, what mediums they're going to use, and where they're going to do the buys. All that I think is in flux and presents new opportunities and new challenges both.
Yeah, for sure. You recently wrote an article about auto spending, and it's interesting how, some clients pulled back during, March and April. Some still had messaging out there. Would love to hear your perspective, on that, and then, kick it over to Joe, who, Joe was mentioning about, what he's advising his clients.
Well, just very quickly, they got away from directly advertising the product to basically saying, we're still here, we're helping, we were part of the solution. And they're slowly pivoting to the idea, which is sort of inherent in the population, that the car is a sanctuary and an oasis during the pandemic. And that gives them a real opportunity to tie their car in with that. And we're seeing quite a lot of messaging along those lines.
For sure, everyone feels pretty safe in their vehicle nowadays, right? You don't have to wear your mask, and you're kind of away from everyone else.
And among the other trends, it's led to a lot of RV rental. It's led to a lot of bicycle purchases. You can't get a bicycle now, and people are reluctant to use Uber and Lyft. They're reluctant to use public transit, so they're pivoting to other things. And as the ads change their fundamental nature, exactly what markets they should be in and what mediums they should use are also sort of in flux. So again, opportunity, challenges, both.
Joe, you mentioned during our pre-call, you were advising clients to kind of stay the course. Do you mind speaking a little bit on that?
Yeah, we've been out talking to customers about our what we call an audience action plan, which is basically just looking at the entire universe and saying, what are my priorities? And, anytime you're in a crisis, anytime you're in a scenario like we're in right now, your priority is protecting the base and really focusing on the people that you currently have as customers. So retaining your audience and being very vigilant about ensuring that you don't lose current customers is a big part of that fundamental strategy that's needed. So the things that we advised really weren't anything out of the ordinary. They were really just like, let's go back to the basic blocking and tackling of marketing. We need to retain the base. We need to go, we need to be really elegant in how we talk about marketing. We don't want to be pushing in a time of crisis, but we want to be there to support. The OEMs are offering very significant incentives for people. Hyundai's offering the return of vehicle if you lose your job offer again, the Hyundai Assurance Program. So those are leverageable assets to speak to customers, whether they're your current or potential customers, to continue the conversation. You don't want to shut down the conversation because, what the data says is out of sight, out of mind. If you're gone out of the conversation 6 months from now, you're forgotten, unfortunately, and you're left behind. And the cost of retaining a customer is a lot less expensive than it is to acquire a customer. And that's been proven over and over again to the degree of 3 to 5x.
Wow. Yeah, interesting stuff. We're seeing a lot more interest in the auto home space for many different reasons. Obviously being brand safe, where brands are able to control the placement of their message and what goes up there. The flexibility and scale that we're seeing in digital out of home, and the rising audience of people out there. And digital out of home has really started to break into some new opportunities, and that gets us really into that programmatic conversation. Lucy, would love to hear from you around what you're hearing and seeing in the space, and maybe some best practices and processes for programmatic out of home for those out in the audience.
Yeah, so I mean, I think first just thinking about the audience of people that are in their cars, and inherently, if they're in their cars, they're likely driving on roads that have billboards on them. And so just thinking about kind of how the two are tied together, it is kind of like an inherent mixture. I think something funny that we actually did with a lot of our clients was share real life pictures of our own team on road trips being stuck in traffic. Not only does everyone hate being stuck in traffic, but at the same time, gave people something to do. And it also sort of proved the use case of people are out there and they're driving, and you want to get in front of those people potentially with a message. And that was across all of our clients, but especially for our auto clients. I think some of the unique elements of programmatic, one, flexibility. So knowing that you might have to change your messaging, or you need to shift the market that you're in because there are different life events that are maybe happening, and you want to be, brand safe and, sensitive to some of the things that are happening in the world today. But I think aside from that, a lot of the targeting that has arose in the last, let's call it 3 years, that's been used historically for digital channels is now really coming into out of home. I think IHS is a great example of that, where the data of understanding who purchases what vehicles, and then for out of home, being able to tie that to something like GPS data and understand how those consumers move throughout the day and what screens actually overlap with where that audience is spending time, is a great way for brands to conquest their competitors, to reach particular age demographics, to think about, where they want to be and when, and be able to seamlessly activate that way. So I think those are some of the best practices that we've given to our clients. And then, outside of just billboards, we are seeing a rise in how clients are kind of complementing that large format with other screens that are intersecting that daily journey. Some of those screens are out of home screens in gas stations and convenience stores and grocery stores. And we're kind of seeing an increase in the leveraging of those as a combination.
Yeah, all places where the data is saying where people are going. So it's really good to see. I love that you touched on the audience targeting piece, because it's super important, especially in the automotive space. These brands spend a lot of money really trying to figure out who that target is. And, typically, previously out of home wasn't that good at being able to identify where those audiences were, who they are, and how to target. Now with technology and essentially the mobile device in place, you're able to understand, traffic patterns around an asset, who's passing by there, overlaying, customer data as well, to make sure that we're reaching the right audience. And I feel like there's two different buckets here. You've got this, audience targeting bucket on the front end for planning, and you also have this measurement piece on the back end. And Joe, if you could talk to us a little bit about your IHS and how they're able to do audience targeting as well, and what you're talking to your clients about.
Yeah, I think you said it. It's really a front end and back end solution that needs to be implemented. And what's happening more and more with our clients is, because we have the ability to build these audiences, segment the universe in a meaningful way based on a specific campaign, agenda, et cetera, and then measure the success of those campaigns to the metrics that really matter at the end of the day, we're able to arrange these opportunities so that they're completely accountable. And not just accountable, but now highly extensive to these various platforms. We started in this business on programmatic, right? And we could do audience targeting and programmatic using cookie data. Good enough, but not great, right? And you start to graduate toward things like social, where the data gets a little higher fidelity, and then now into platforms like connected TV and digital out of home, and really being able to leverage all facets of marketing almost, right? To the degree where almost every impression that a marketer can deliver can be addressable and can be targetable without having these blind spots in their budgets. And that's an opportunity for everybody. I mean, that really creates an opportunity for the media companies, for the data companies, and for the marketers, the OEMs and dealers themselves, to really make sure every dollar matters and is meaningful, that goes out. And because those are all conversations with consumers. Those are all consumer experience points that need to be curated and thought through in a meaningful way versus just kind of splashing things out there.
For sure. Lucy, I'd love to hear, you mentioned audience as well. How do you guys work with different audiences, and how does that play into the digital out-of-home space?
Yeah, well, I think Joe really captured just the fact that there needs to be consistency across the audience set that you're using, because most of these auto manufacturers are not just activating in one channel. And so the idea is, how do these channels work together to reach a consumer and get them to kind of consider making a purchase or kind of work their way down that funnel? And it's not just going to be through a single touch point. So I think the first thing is, one of the benefits of using a DSP that can allow for out-of-home targeting that uses data providers that are used across every other channel is that consistency element. And so I think, IHS Polk is a great one where you can understand people based on their purchase behaviors. But I think, as Jim had mentioned earlier, we're also starting to see a rise in a different set of consumers. You have people that have lived in cities that didn't need a car that now feel like having a car is going to give them that escape and the ability to, get out of the city and drive places. And there's a lot of different ways that you can think about targeting that audience. Maybe it's a more millennial audience. Maybe you're looking for people that work in certain industries that might need a car. Maybe you're looking for people that make a certain income. So there's all different data sets that can be leveraged for this, and it kind of depends on who you're trying to reach. I know for us, a lot of the audiences that we access outside of our direct partnerships are through the LiveRamp data store, where it's almost like you have a swath of all of these different data partners that people are using across every channel to reach particular people, and kind of think about, how do we get in front of the right people at the right time? Because there's also the time element too. It's not just about scoring which boards, but it's also, when are those people going to be there? And how do you make sure that you're not just activating where, but when? I also think, just going back to the consistency piece and thinking about measurement, it's the exact same thing. So if you're using a measurement partner that you believe is your source of truth, you shouldn't have a different measurement partner that's now measuring your out of home. And so I think that that's a huge part of this, is understanding whether it's sales lift, whether it's foot traffic to the dealership, whatever the brand's KPI is, that there's consistency of the ability to use those same third-party partners across every channel, so that you're really looking at how those dollars are working together for you and not really siloing them out.
I saw Jim smiling when you were talking about audiences and their difference in what they're purchasing now. Jim, can you comment a little bit on what you're seeing in vehicle purchases and how the consumer has really changed?
I wanted to sort of piggyback on what Lucy was saying there, because what's interesting is the hugest or the biggest part of the market today is crossover SUVs. And SUVs as a whole make an incredible percentage of the market, it's like 70%. The sedan has a much diminished role in American life. And the SUV was always sold as a symbol of freedom. It's the basic appeal. If you were to actually break it down, the SUV is probably not the best car for a lot of people, but it has a lot of emotional appeal to them. And the appeal that it has is the same appeal that Lucy was talking about. The people that suddenly want to be able to have an escape. And it's not exactly an accident that Ford called the car the Escape, and gave people this idea that goes with the SUV, that it could be a symbol of freedom. The car is an oasis. It's a way of getting away from your present reality and away from the city into the country. We've also seen people moving to the country from cities as part of the same thing. But I think one thing that'd be important to look at here is what they call VMT, or vehicle miles traveled. And I think you would probably find a big upshoot in vehicle miles traveled in the last month or two as people get back on the road, not just for vacation, but a lot of people going back to work and stuff, which means they're going to see these out-of-home assets a lot more than they would have a short while ago. Also, they're going to be driving past them every day, which I would assume would reinforce whatever message is on the billboard.
That's a great point. We do get data from our partners over at Geopath, and have seen miles traveled really gone up as the summer's gone on as well. So it's a great point that you made, and we're really trying to understand how people are changing that movement around, and that movement from potentially from urban environments to the suburbs, and still trying to figure out how people are moving throughout the country. Want to bring it back. We've spoken a lot about audience, but I want to bring it now to kind of the back end in this measurement piece. And one of the things that as leaders in the space at OUTFRONT, we really tried to do was understand how automotive sales were impacted by out of home. And so we did some analysis around a regional campaign in a major U.S. market, and based on data from our attribution partners, IHS market included, we found that those that were exposed to out of home were 17% more likely to purchase a new vehicle than those were not exposed to out of home. This was really a first to a market kind of study that we did with a location partner and those at IHS. And we think it's really really one of those kind of tipping points here to really get automotive marketers excited, especially in that retail level where they're really trying to use their incentives to move the metal. And Joe, I would love to kind of talk to you and hear from you how that process goes, and maybe a little bit of background around it, so that those on the call can understand how it goes, and maybe can put that into their marketing arsenal or toolkit moving forward.
Yeah, no, I think I think we the way that we handle measurement is really about there's a couple of things. One, it's anonymous and aggregated. That's that's clear and privacy friendly, in the most privacy friendly fashion possible, because what we do have is consumer data at a household level, that's the origin of the data. So for us to be able to report on that type of sales match, we're leveraging identity through different layers, right? So in the case with Clear Channel, we're using identity mapping through location-based companies who are capturing that identity at a mobile ID level, so we can map mobile ID data to that household data. Again, the way that we can do that across any medium is really driven by privacy-friendly, hashed identity, in gathering different data elements, whether it's someone who's got mobile ID, someone who's got cookie IDs, email addresses, whatever that identifier is, we're able to then map that into our universe and provide that look, of who bought, what did they buy, and not who bought necessarily by person, but just, how many people, what did they buy, what dealership did they buy it from. So the granularity and specificity to the make, model, trim level information that we can provide can sort of serve, any purpose in that campaign. We also, we go further up the funnel in terms of just sales match is great, but the amount of vehicle sales in like a 90-day campaign window isn't going to be that dramatic. But what we can also do is provide a whole bunch of other attributes about the households that were reached, meaning we could tell you that 10% of your audience that you reached were a Ford owning household, for example, or 20% of the households that you reach have a lease in their garage versus a buy, or 50% of the households have used cars or buy used cars historically. So we can start to paint a picture of the efficacy of your campaign based on the audiences reached. And that, again, across any medium where we can create any kind of identity layer connection to make that possible.
Lucy, I'd love, give me the perspective there on digital out of home, because, I think this is something that's, super important as, brands look at digital out of home and the flexibility and the scale that is currently out there.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a couple of elements that Joe touched on. One is the ability to measure holistically and understand for those that were exposed, did they actually did you drive a sale with that ad? And I think that something that's really important to understand about out of home is that it is a one-to-many medium. And so in terms of being able to properly measure the medium, it's not going to all be one-to-one. You're not going to be able to track every single person that was exposed to out of home, just because we don't have trackers on everyone. And so I think that the ability to ensure that there's enough impressions, you've reached a large enough audience. Often for out of home, you're collecting mobile IDs of those that were in front of the screens at the time that the ads were playing and then passing them back. Or then you can take a look at that pretty large sample size and then kind of build out a projection. So I think that part of it is making sure that when brands are getting on board to include this measurement, they kind of understand just the nuances of out of home and make sure that that is an element that they're understanding of in the results that they're going to get. And then I think alongside of that, being able to prove out that you layered on an audience and that you actually reached those people and they're part of that high value audience that you are looking to be in touch with, I think is also just a huge factor in validating that, you know, out of home being a newer medium to apply audiences to, that those audiences are real and that that's actually who your campaign is reaching. Because, you know, you might be able to capture a lot of the sales that were made maybe in those 90 days, but knowing that this could have a lasting effect on future opportunities for those people to make a vehicle purchase, and knowing you reach the right people, I think is almost just as important.
Absolutely. I mean, it's really, you know, each individual impression right now is, you know, critically judged, and we need to be able to show, you know, ROI, and with technology in place now and being able to match it back to sales, that's one thing. There's obviously an array of KPIs within automotives, and, you know, from a top of funnel to mid to bottom. And, you know, Jim, I'd love to get your perspective on how brands are looking at that funnel now, and, you know, either adjusting it or figuring out where the money goes, because as you mentioned before, you know, a lot of it was towards that lower tier. You know, if you clicked on the Google search and that drove you to the market, they got credit for it, and you know, then the money started to flow their way.
Well, I think for a long time they were focused on television, and I think cable television gave them the chance to target their consumers a lot more pointedly. You know, I live in the New York metro market, and if you wanted to have a TV ad on, you reached a huge, I suppose you were advertising just one dealership, it would have to be on in 4 states, and you were paying the rates for that. But then cable allowed much more targeted reaching out. And today, I think the marketers are looking beyond just TV to other options. And obviously, they found digital SEO type stuff. They like that a lot. But I think they're open to any avenue really, and they're willing to atomize their spend in a lot of different mediums to make it work. They're open to that. They have to be convinced, though. They're not. I wouldn't say they're skeptical. But they're open, but they need to be convinced.
I feel like everyone's got to prove themselves, and hopefully we're doing a little bit of that here today.
Well, as I said, that one thing they're doing is putting out very different messages than they're used to. For instance, Lincoln, and I wrote about this for Media Village, has a partnership with Calm, which is like a meditation website, and they're advancing this idea of the car as sanctuary. But the funny thing is, they were doing it before COVID.
Yep.
Not just tied to that. As I was saying, a lot of the trends are amplified by COVID, but pre-existed, which is fascinating to me.
It feels like COVID just sped up all the trends, right? It, like, you know,
Very
car
much
buying was getting easier. Now it's, you know, you don't have to go to a dealership. Even, you know, in our space and out of home, you know, we've seen an uptick in digital out of home, especially in programmatic, because of that, you know, and we're at OUTFRONT, we're working to to really capitalize on that and really get the type of offerings to our automotive advertisers, that they can get in really every other media space and media other formats. So appreciate it. We're gonna dive into a few questions here from the crew. I think the first one directed at Lucy. It's, I think people want to know, what types of assets can be purchased within digital out of home, programmatically. Sorry.
Yeah, so in terms of the assets available, I think, billboards is definitely one that not only is the first thing that comes to mind when you think of out of home, but there's obviously a very large footprint across the US, but it definitely spans outside of that to things like, as I mentioned before, gas stations, convenience stores, but also even some other locations that are starting to open across the country. You think about office buildings, you think about even like a Topgolf, malls, gyms, casual dining restaurants, there's street furniture, there's urban panels, there's screens on the subways. There's really, I think, more and more screens are becoming available and more of them are being digitized because of the ability to have that flexibility, but then also just be in these places where there wasn't necessarily an advertising opportunity before, that with these screens can exist today.
Awesome, thank you. That's super helpful. One of the questions here is around, we talk about tracking sales lift, and that was, we spent a lot of time on that, but I guess what other KPIs or what other, that full funnel approach in the auto space, there's multiple tiers with multiple, I guess, goals at the end of the game. Maybe kick it to Joe and find out, what other, KPIs can be measured, from not just out of home, but just in general.
Yeah, I mean, I talked a little bit about it where, it's not necessarily just outcomes that you can measure, but also the quality of the audience that you reached and the actual, target, if you're reaching that target group that you were looking to get to. So that's, I think that's increasingly important in mediums like TV and out of home, now that you can do that, where you would historically just rely on like age and gender target. Did I reach a certain age and gender? But now you can get a lot more granular than that. Beyond that, I think the brands are looking at everything from, obviously survey data, like being able to understand if there's movement in opinion and consideration of a brand, to that foot traffic inside the dealerships, and really just all the website KPIs are still such a big part of that experience. And I think they become more important because, like you said in the very beginning, Les, the consumer experience is changing when it comes to buying a car. Your experience of taking the family on a Saturday to the dealership and hanging out at 3 or 4 dealerships and having coffee in the weight room, and like that's kind of in the past, and generationally, it's really in the past when you start to look at younger generations that don't even consider that to be something they ever want to do. So at the end of the day, the consumer experience path, which is all, addressable, trackable, all those breadcrumbs are kind of, collectible to certain data points. And, what we do, we're working with some of these companies that are powering those e-commerce engines that are now existing in the dealer and OEM websites. We're working with them to help kind of understand the blind spots. Why did people leave the shopping cart? If they left the shopping cart, did they go buy something else? And we can kind of help resolve some of those blind spots in that data. But that's going to be, a huge part of the process now. It's the Amazon effect of the auto industry. It's no industry safe, right? It's like everything is going to that, to that domain. And the thing that powers those experiences is better data, right? The more that you know about that consumer as they're going through the process, the better you're going to be equipped to serve them the next thing or the right message or the right offer. And that's going to increasingly be important to OEMs and dealers.
Feels very direct to consumer to me. Jim, do you see this as a trend over the long haul? And if so, what's the dealer's role in this whole the whole ecosystem?
Dealers are trying to figure it out too. And one of the ways I've written about this for the New York Times and other places is looking at how automakers and dealers are pivoting towards offering a concierge experience to the buyer. It's not exactly buying the car online, but it's having, say, when your car needs to go into the shop, to have a car delivered to you and having them pick up your car. So you have you get very little inconvenience. And in some cases, as with Lincoln, it's part of the purchase. And they've been advertising that a whole lot. And on the converse side, the service is a huge part of the money that dealerships make. And they've been trying to get people to want to go to the dealership, which is traditionally not a favorite part of the people's day. It's sort of like going to the dentist, right? So in the service departments, they sort of kicked it up by offering all kinds of amenities. I found this out when I got a massage at my local Honda dealer. But
Nice.
they're also putting in cafes and movie theaters, especially in Texas where you are. There's a ton of this. And the very large dealerships, they're almost becoming malls with the intention of retaining the service business, which is maybe 30 to 30% of the profits of a dealership. So the dealership model is changing very much. I mean, some people have even predicted that dealerships go away, at least the idea of having a big inventory of vehicles on the lot, that kind of model. If you can just order a car very much online with all the features you want, why should you necessarily settle for something they just happen to have in stock? So the whole dealership model is in flux as just about everything else in the auto industry right now.
Super interesting. I took advantage of getting my car serviced. They came and picked it up, serviced the vehicle, did the whole sanitized thing and brought it back. And it was quite lovely. And you know, for anyone that goes on those road trips this summer, that's the first thing you do before you get on the road, right? You got to get that vehicle serviced, make sure you're not going to be stuck on the side of the road, you know.
Yeah, see, once you've had the pickup and delivery thing, you're not going to want to go back and sit in the waiting room, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, you don't want to go back.
Exactly. Well, one final question. I just quickly around the horn wanted to just get an idea around, you know, what developments you guys expect in the next, you know, 1 to 2 years in your respective areas. And Lucy, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I think kind of thinking about even the earlier question that was asked about what type of formats exist in digital out of home right now. I mean, I think that it's going to be an area that's going to continue to grow. There's going to be a continuation of screens that were previously static that are being converted into digital. And many of these are going to be the best boards because there's an opportunity to now show multiple advertisers on those screens that are considered the most premium of inventory. And I think as you continue to convert them, you know, you're going to see an enhancement of what those screens can do, whether it's things like dynamic creative, pulling in different API feeds. I know, you know, one of the questions that was asked that we can kind of see on the side here is around using different sets of data. So, you know, knowing that people can use their first party data by leveraging, you know, a LiveRamp or an Oracle to pass those device IDs that are part of your own set of data to then tie to location data and then map out where those consumers go. You know, this exists today, but I think more and more brands are trying to own their data and kind of take advantage of the information that they have to better the advertising experience. So I only expect that to be on the rise in the next couple of years.
Joe, how about you?
I think it goes back to what I was just talking about. I think that experience, that consumer experience is just changing so much in the auto industry that, you know, for so long had kind of stagnated around franchise dealers doing things a certain way, following a protocol, a consumer reaching out, the dealer kind of forcing the consumer's hand to come into the store so I can talk to you about this deal. You know, it's just all those kind of walls and barriers being broken down where the consumer is empowered, just like it's happened in every industry, in every category, happened early on in travel, which is another huge category like auto, where, you know, consumers kind of disintermediated the process to make it easier for them. And at the end of the day, it should be, right? Because you're the customer, you're the one putting the money forward. And in the case of a car, it's a huge purchase. It's usually a large commitment, the second largest commitment you make. unless you're a renter and you're buying a car, that's your biggest commitment. So ultimately, the consumer experience changing is going to be probably one of the biggest developments that OEMs and dealers have to invest in significantly over the next 1 to 2 years, which is digitization, the experience on the floor, but primarily in this digital environment, and how they continually communicate and speak to consumers throughout the process.
Thanks, Joe. And, I think one of the things here with Out of Home is obviously our robust tool set and flexibility, programmatic buying, audience targeting, and campaign measurement. We talk about change. I think we may have changed one person's opinion of Out of Home here on the call. Jim, I know when we first spoke, you hadn't really heard of Out of Home. The brands aren't talking about it. Will these changes that we're doing in this industry change the perception of automakers around Out of Home?
Yeah, I think so. And there's something you mentioned at the beginning, Les, I think it would actually reverberate with auto marketers. And that's the concept of brand safety. I think they've been burned on that to some degree with Facebook and Google, where their ads have been put in the context of places they don't want to be seen in. And I hear that mentioned a lot. And I think if you can assure them about that, I think they would be very into it. And I do think also that the digital appeal, that the fact that I think 5% of your assets are digital right now, but it's increasing quite a bit. I think that part of it is really going to appeal to them, getting into that digital out-of-home space.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you guys, everyone being on this call. Anyone that's listening, you can forward any questions that we didn't get to css@outfrontmedia.com. And I'll just end with, letting everyone understand that the out-of-home industry has really shifted gears, right? Technology has evolved the space, and it has really never been a more exciting time for auto marketers to leverage out-of-home. I thank you all for attending, and be on the lookout for the next episode of Influenced by OUTFRONT coming soon. Cheers. Peace out.